Welcome to A Fine Time, The Nanny Revisited. This is a podcast about The Nanny, where we recap each episode and then discuss, sharing our own unique take on each episode. I'm Bernadette.
And I'm Debbie. Today we're talking about episode 57, The Two Mrs. Sheffields. As usual, we'll start with a brief summary of the episode. Maxwell's mother comes to visit, and to put it nicely, she and Fran get off on the wrong foot when they meet at a flower shop and fight over the last tulips. When they meet again at the Sheffield home, Fran thinks that she is just some psycho who followed her home until Maxwell identifies her as his mother. Unfortunately, Maxwell's relationship with his mother is not ideal, as she derives sustenance from criticizing everything in his life. Mrs. Sheffield's visit does not improve after Cece informs her that Fran has designs on Maxwell. Unable to stay silent, Mrs. Sheffield speaks to Maxwell about her suspicions that something is going on between him and Fran and her plan to put a stop to it. Elizabeth is concerned about Fran having too much influence over the children and does not consider her a good match for Maxwell because she's of a lower social class. Maxwell reacts poorly to his mother's concern and asks Fran to marry him, right in front of his mother. Fran says yes, leading to Maxwell regretting asking her, and Fran and Sylvia are reviving old wedding plans. Val and Fran realize that Maxwell's proposal was actually too good to be true, and Fran decides to do what any woman in her position would do: play with his head so much that he looks like Mr. Softy. On Fran's request, Maxwell arrives at the Fine family home, and Fran convincingly plays the part of a soon-to-be blushing bride. On Fran's request, Maxwell's mother arrives, and mother and son take the first step in improving their relationship, and the wedding is called off. To assuage Maxwell's guilt, Fran asks him to do three things. 1, not tell Cece for 48 hours. 2, break the news to Sylvia. And 3, return her anticipated wedding night attire, lip gloss, and only lip gloss. Bernadette, do you want to add anything?
Nope, you've got it.
Awesome. Would you then like to take us to scene 1 in the flower shop?
Yes, so we open this episode in the flower shop. Fran walks in. I kind of feel like we need to talk a little bit about what she's wearing,
Yes.
just because it is pertinent to the
Yes.
scene.
I agree.
I mean, to me, it looks like plastic, right? The jacket
Yes.
and the skirt. It's like a black jacket, very shiny, very plasticky looking.
Mm-hmm.
And then again, a short skirt. It was pink, right?
So black and red.
Oh, sorry, red. But again, that same type of like plasticky material. Um, and so she's coming in, she's, you know, first of all, she does her Fran thing where she sees a handsome man at the counter buying flowers and she's kind of fishing for information. Oh, are you getting those for your girlfriend? Oh no, my fiance, we're getting married in a couple weeks. She's great, and of course she walks off because he's taken.
Right.
So
She loses
no point
interest.
yeah. Yeah. No point in carrying on this conversation. And so she goes off, to the corner of the shop and in walks in then an older lady, not old, but older lady, blonde, put together. The male clerk goes up to her. Is there something I can do for you? And she goes, yes, but we hardly know each other. She's
Exactly.
British.
I like your
Uh,
impersonation, by the way.
yeah, excuse my impression, but yes, she is wanting 2 dozen white tulips to be delivered to her son's house, Mr. Sheffield, Maxwell Sheffield, the Broadway producer.
Right.
And uh, but the male clerk's like, oh, well, indicates over that this lady is looking at the
The
last
last.
couple.
Yeah.
Yes. And who? That girl. And then apparently that girl theme music plays as we show Fran, of course, holding the tulips.
Right.
And so now we know this is Maxwell's mother, so we presume Mrs. Sheffield walks over to Fran. Fran, of course, is oblivious, doesn't know who this lady is.
Correct.
And she kind of super seriously is like, I've had my eyes on those. And Fran's just kind of dismissive, like, well, I've had my eyes on Antonio Banderas and he's not coming home with me because, again, but at that time, Mrs. Sheffield just takes the flowers out of Fran's hands.
Right.
And
She like
she's just
grabs
like,
them.
oh, yes, I'll just buy you some plastic flowers to go along with the petroleum products you're wearing.
Right.
And of course, Fran's, upset by this. Well, as if the British are so stylish. And she's like, I'll have you know that the portrait of the royal wedding looked like Mama's family. And she takes back, Fran has reclaimed the flowers and is walking away. And Mrs. Sheffield's like, New Yorkers are so pushy, and goes and grabs the flowers again.
Right.
Like, give me the damn tulips. And again, they're like fighting over this bouquet of flowers. And um and Fran's like, my boss told me to go get these for his mother, and I want the old bat to like me, as she's like
Mm-hmm.
struggling with her over the flowers. And then Fran like lets go. Like, why are we fighting about this? You keep that. I'll go get the new fresh batch in the refrigerator. That catches Mrs. Sheffield's attention, and she shoves the flowers back into Fran's arms and says, well, in that case, you keep the withered,
Wilted ones.
wilted ones. And so she goes into, there's like a little door leading into like kind of, it's like a walk-in freezer, I suppose. And Fran triumphantly locks her in there. And so the last shot we see is of Mrs. Sheffield, like hands and face up against, like in horror that she's locked in there.
Yep. And
Yeah.
there are no tulips there.
Nope. No, of course not, because the clerk himself said the last ones are with that girl over there.
Exactly.
So, like, she was kind of gullible in that moment. But yeah. Is there anything you want to add to that opening scene?
No, you did a great job.
Oh, thank you. Will you take us to the second scene?
Sure. So we are back at the Sheffield home, and everyone's getting ready for Maxwell's mother's arrival. And Fran is talking to Niles about, like, when I meet her, do I have to curtsy? Because, this skirt becomes a tube top, in that case. And Niles looks at her and doesn't believe her and says, I don't like, let's see. And she's like, bad butler. And she's like, I don't care. I don't care. I'm not changing. And Maxwell comes in and asks, is that what you're wearing? And she's like, no, of course not. And she like starts running up.
Said hell no.
Hell no. Right. No, I'm going to go change. And she like starts going up the stairs, and he's clearly nervous. He's clearly uncomfortable. Maxwell is clearly
Mhm.
uncomfortable. And he
Yep.
explains to Fran that my mother derives sustenance from criticizing everything in my life. And Fran stops and turns around. Yeah. So, oh, I keep forgetting you're not Jewish.
Mhm.
And of course, Cece is now in the room as well. And she says to Maxwell that, his adversarial relationship with his mother is his own fault. And that she finds she catches more flies with honey. Well, Niles, as usual, has a nice zinger for her. I always thought your tongue darted out.
Mhm.
Well, Elizabeth Sheffield shows up on the scene. And, at first, I don't want to call her warm because it's not warm, but she appraises Maxwell. Hello, darling. Oh, look at you. The spitting image of your father. Same eyes, same smile. That's all fine. And then she continues with the addition of, all that's missing is a naked secretary in your bed wearing my pearls.
Mhm.
So, like, at first things seem fine and they quickly go downhill, right?
Yep.
She turns to Niles and asks him, where are your tails? Because he's in just like a regular suit. And Cece chimes in, he had them cropped when they did his ears. And the only person in the room who Mrs. Sheffield likes is Cece.
Yeah,
And she
which is
called,
indicative.
yeah. Oh, Cece, you're a stitch. I missed you. Maxwell, you should have her write a comedy for you. God knows you need a hit. And we then have this really nice scene, not a whole scene, but like this nice moment between Maxwell and Niles, where Niles asks, shall I poison them at dinner, sir? And he says, Niles, it's 2 hours away.
Yeah.
Um, I think the reason they have that scene is because Cece says that she can't wait to tell Elizabeth all the exciting things going on in my life. And she says, "Oh, let me visit the powder room first." And Niall says, "Oh no, you won't. She'll be done before you get there."
Yeah.
So Elizabeth, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, yeah, because like obviously there's nothing exciting going on with
No,
Cece.
Cece has nothing going on in her life, except her obsession over Maxwell. Um, so Elizabeth goes into the bathroom. Fran comes downstairs asking, how's this? It's a designer label. And Max is like, the label's lovely. Where's the rest of it?
Hmm.
And Fran's done. Um, she says, "Oh, I have a little gift for your mom. I think lucky for you, I left it upstairs." And there's this like very well choreographed, and I'm totally not going to do it justice. This choreographed moment where she starts walking upstairs, and then Mrs. Sheffield comes out and says, "Oh, I forgot my handbag." She goes back into the bathroom, and Fran comes back downstairs and says, "Oh, I think it's actually in the kitchen."
Hmm.
Apparently, Fran had Yetta make Mrs. Sheffield her famous prune Danish.
Hmm.
Um, well, and as she's going into the kitchen, Elizabeth comes out and goes back to the car because her driver's there. Um, and so she leaves, and this is when we find out that it's the prune Danish that Fran has, and Max was like, she's not really a prune Danish kind of person. Oh well, she will be after she eats Ma's stuffed Derma.
Hmm.
And then the doorbell rings, and Fran goes to answer the door, and it's Elizabeth. But again, Fran still doesn't know this. "What are you, nuts? You followed me home? What kind of psycho case are you? Would you get a life, you fruitcake?" She closes the door, turns to Maxwell. "Do you know who that weirdo was?" And he's like, "That's my mother." And Fran like realizes that's bad. It's like, "You think she liked me?"
Hmm.
No, the answer is no, Fran. She
Nope.
did not like you.
Because
Um,
actually, like when she opens the door, they both simultaneously go, "You."
yes, yes. um, which is unfortunate that they both recognize each other. Um, yeah, I actually have a little bit of a bone to pick with this scene, um, which is the fact that Elizabeth rang the doorbell. I
Mm.
mean, the reason they did that is so that Fran would open the door and they'd have that great moment, as you described, you.
Hmm.
Um, but like, wouldn't she have just walked back into the house? Like,
Well, maybe if like again they're not as close, and she's all about, she chided Niles earlier for not wearing tails. So maybe
mhm.
she just thinks there are certain rules to abide by. But I
Oh,
don't know.
interesting.
It might show like they're not that close.
They clearly are not that close.
Yeah.
Do you have anything you want to add to that scene?
No.
All right, would you like to take us to scene 3?
Yes. So we are now in the kitchen, and Elizabeth is there, and we see the back of Cece, and Elizabeth says, "Well, turn around. Let's see how it looks." And as Cece turns around, she also reveals that Maggie is also there, and they are wearing matching outfits. And it's kind of eerie how similar they look because their hair length, they're both blonde, and their hair length is similar. The
Mm-hmm.
only difference being that Maggie has bangs, and they're even kind of wearing similar makeup um, in this scene. But
Mm-hmm.
you know, Cece is like, "Oh, isn't it wonderful? We could be twins." Uh,
Just what
and
every teenager wants to hear.
yes, and then Maxwell, of course, comes by. "Oh, Margaret, you should change. You look 50." And then Maggie tries to talk to her grandma, and she's trying to explain, Fran and I have a routine with shopping. I buy outfits I like, and she looks for men in the men's department.
Right.
And Elizabeth's kind of dismissive, like, "Oh, I know, you want the plunging look, but shouldn't we wait until you have more for it to plunge into?"
Right.
And Maggie's like, "Oh God," and like leaves the kitchen. And Cece turns admiringly towards Elizabeth. "You're so good with her." Um, yeah. And so then Elizabeth and Cece have a moment um, where, Elizabeth's saying how she's kind of worried about Fran. And Cece's doing this thing where she's like trying to like play it off, but she immediately is like, oh, she's a low life gold digger who has designs on Maxwell. And at first, Elizabeth's like, oh, he would never get with a trollop like that. If he's anything like his father, oh,
Yeah.
oh no, that realization. Well, let's pray that she takes good care of the children. And then, of course, at that time, Fran comes in the side door with Brighton, and Brighton obviously has some type of nosebleed. Fran's kind of telling him to tilt his head up, put pressure on it, watch out you know, you don't want a trail of blood that even the OJ jury can't deny.
Hmm.
Um, and first of all, just as a quick side note, you're not supposed to tilt your head back with the nosebleed. But anyway, so, Elizabeth, of course, is concerned, and Fran's like, oh, yeah, he's fine. The coach said, or no, Elizabeth's like, aren't you going to take him to the hospital? And Fran's like, no, the coach said he's fine. Just look out for if he vomits or just falls unexpectedly. And then so Fran's sending Brighton upstairs and just like, yeah, just yell out if your shoulder blade pops out again. So
Right.
he obviously like was banged up. Um,
Yeah.
and Elizabeth's like, where were you when he was being brutalized? And she's like, oh, smearing eggs on the other team's bus.
Yep.
And then, so she and Fran, of course, are standing next to each other while they're having this conversation. And Maxwell comes in. Oh, when did you two become so thick? And Fran, of course, misinterprets that and says, oh, since the 14th. But it seems like she may have had some salty nuts on the plane.
Right.
And um, Elizabeth immediately chides Maxwell for not having his like vest buttoned up. Um, like he's a little disheveled looking. And he, of course, is like, I'm the one actually working, and
Yeah.
it's hot.
She says, I can't distinguish you from the servants.
Yes. Oh, it's easy. I'm the one actually working.
Exactly.
Leave me be. It's hot in my office. Because well, before he says the hot in the office, when he's like, I'm the one who's actually working, Fran's kind of like, huh, can't wait to tell Niles, And then he mentions it's hot in his office, and Fran kind of, jokingly, flirtatiously is like, I don't remember coming into your office.
Right.
And Maxwell kind of turns to his mom, and he's like, yeah, sometimes she sits on the edge of my desk with these outfits.
In one of her outfits
Yes. And then he like leaves, and Fran kind of talks to Elizabeth, like, oh, how could you resist from biting his little tushy
when
when
he
he
was
was,
a baby.
yeah,
Clarify
when
that
he was a baby. Yes. Um, and then she kind of looks at Elizabeth and is like, has determined that the prune Danish has not done its work yet.
Correct.
So, is there anything you want to add?
I just want to mention that we learned that the reason Niles is not there is that he's at the track.
Ah, yes. Yes.
That's all I wanted to add.
Yep. Will you take us to the office then?
Sure. So Maxwell's in the office and Niles comes in and says, bad news, sir. I'm afraid there's been an emergency. Your mother's been called back to London and is packing as we speak. And Maxwell gets this look of glee, relief, happiness all mixed together on his face. Really? And Niles breaks his heart by saying, early April Fool's, sir. And Maxwell's like, that's not funny, Niles. This is not a good day to tease me. Miss Babcock never made it to the theater. I'm afraid she's missing. And the exact same thing happens to Niles. Really? April Fool's to the second power, says
Mm-hmm.
Maxwell. And needless to say, Niles did not find this amusing. And he adds, mine was funny, sir. That's just plain cruel.
Mm-hmm.
Well, anyway, so Elizabeth comes in and says, Maxwell, I have something I want to discuss with you. And Maxwell does not want to have this discussion with her. And he says, now, oh, mother, much as I'd love to stay and chat, I'm afraid I have a meeting with, he clearly doesn't have a meeting, but he's like quickly putting his papers in order to like leave. And Niles volunteers the name Ethel Merman. And Maxwell goes with it, yes. And I may be a while because she's dead. And
Mm-hmm.
Niles is like, oh, I better go cancel, sir.
Yeah,
And he
then you better
leaves.
go cancel, sir.
Exactly. So Niles leaves, and Elizabeth says that she'd like to dismiss Maxwell's nanny. And Maxwell's like, don't you mean discuss, mother? No, mother. Why the sudden interest in my life? Did your poodle die? Well, about this nanny, I think she has far too much influence over the children. I can assure you, mother, I don't know what you mean. And with that great comedic timing that the show has, in runs Gracie. And I think it makes sense to talk about what Gracie's wearing.
Yep.
Gracie is we're basically a mini Fran. She has her hair all big and teased up. She has on a black long sleeve shirt, black tights or leggings, and then a animal print dress. Is it a leopard print?
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I'm not
Yeah.
sure which big cat, but it's
Yeah.
like it's not a white tiger. Let's just put it that way. It's not stripes. It's like anyway. And Gracie comes in and she says, "Daddy, look at me. Who am I?" And he's like, "That's very nice, sweetheart. Now go change." And she says, "I can't. I'm playing doctor." Hoo ha! Are you married? And she does like a hand gesture, like we've seen Fran do. And then she laughs
And
like
friends
Fran,
laugh. Yeah. Yeah.
and then she leaves. So needless to say, Fran is having somewhat of an influence over the children.
Hmm.
And anyway, Elizabeth continues her discussion, shall we say, with Maxwell. "Let me make myself quite clear. I know that there's something going on between you and this nanny person. I will not allow it." "Mother, there is nothing going on between." "Wait a minute. What do you mean you won't allow it? You're a Sheffield, dear. This woman's not of our class." "Oh, that's preposterous," he responds. And in comes Fran, proving her point. Knock, knock. "Oh, you've got to see this. Hello, Dolly," spelled out in SpaghettiOs. "I swear it poured right out of the can. Is that freaky or what?" And like, they don't engage with her, but Elizabeth continues that, telling Maxwell that if he pursues this, that, "I will have no choice but to disinherit you." "Well," he responds, "I don't need your money, mother, or your approval, and I'll do whatever the bloody hell I like." And Fran says, "Oh, don't talk to your mother like that." Well, he stops talking to his mother, turns to Fran and says, "Miss Fine, will you marry me?" And Elizabeth tries to interject, and Fran's like, "No, let him get a word in edgewise, lady." And Elizabeth finally says, "Maxwell, stop making a spectacle of yourself." "Oh, did you think that this was a spectacle?" "Oh, no, mother, this is." And he grabs Fran and passionately kisses her, raising our kiss count to 6.
Hmm.
Um, and then, Fran sort of left, you know, he asked her to marry her,
Hmm.
asked her to marry him. And, she acknowledges, "This is all so sudden. I mean, I'm really going to have to think about it." Okay. Like, yeah, she's going to marry him. Do you want to add anything, or do you want to?
Well, and then so then she grabs him and kisses him, bringing us
Oh,
to
you're right.
7.
You're right. Is there anything else you want to
No,
add?
nope.
All right.
No,
Would you?
yeah, we kind of fast forward a little because we're
Mhm.
still in the office.
Right.
But Maxwell's at his desk, head in his hand. Obviously, the reality of what he has done hitting him. And Niles walks in, and Maxwell's like, "Oh, Niles, I've really done it this time. You won't even, can't even believe what I've done." And Niles immediately is like, "You mean your attempt to get back at your mother for missing you in Hamlet?" Hamlet?
Yes, Hamlet.
Hamilton. Okay, Hamlet. So, and I
But
didn't get the rest
by
verbatim.
asking Miss Fine to marry you in front of her, resulting in Miss Fine skipping from the room singing "Sadie, Sadie, married lady."
Yep. And he's like, and in response, Maxwell's like, "Oh, did you use your, I think like big ears or something to listen in?"
Cleaning
You
the
know.
intercom with that big fat nosy ear of yours again,
Okay,
Niles.
yeah. And then Niles is like, all innocence. "I just guess her. You mean I'm right?"
Exactly.
um, and again, you know, Maxwell's still reeling from this, um, and Niles, of course, is like, "You go through with it," because Maxwell's like, "What should I do?" And Niles is all like, "You go through for it. You could have a honeymoon in Provence." And like he hands Maxwell, I guess, some type of sheet with something about Provence. And immediately Niles picks up the phone, says, "I'll make the reservations."
Yep.
He's calling. And again, Maxwell's still just like reeling from it. And could I really just defy, marry her to defy my mom? And Niles is all for this. She's like, defy her, rub it in her face,
Yup.
bonjour, as he is talking to the person. Sorry. And but then Maxwell's just like, no, I can't do this. And so Niles is like hanging up the phone. Oh, you stupid fool. And
Hmm.
obviously it's directed at Maxwell, but he tries to cover by saying, it's the French. Uh, and
Monsieur, au revoir.
mhm,
Click. The French, sir.
yes. And then Maxwell goes on to say, the poor thing has a crush on me as it is. And Niles is like, oh, really? Um, and Maxwell's like, well, wouldn't you? And again, in his very dry tone, yes, you've always been the sunshine of my life.
Exactly.
And Maxwell again's talking about how, it was just in the heat of the moment that he asked Fran to marry him.
Hmm.
And, well, oh, she couldn't have taken me seriously. He's trying to reassure himself. Like, surely she didn't take it seriously. And,
Hmm.
uh, unless you have something else, then you can cue to the next scene. But
Fran did take it seriously,
yes.
as we see in the next scene. We cut the next scene, switches to the Fine family home, and we see Fran standing on, I think it's the coffee table, in a
Hmm.
wedding gown.
Yep. Striking a
And
pose.
she is striking a pose. She's showing off herself. She's modeling the wedding gown. And she has her hair up, and there's a veil and the big long white gloves. And do we want to talk more about the dress now or wait for favorite fashion?
Either way.
Let's talk about it now, just because it's relevant, I think.
Yep.
Um, so it's a strapless gown, right? And it's sort of odd to me because it seems like it's straight down, but then it has like an attached skirt behind it, sort of giving it a little bit more volume towards the bottom. It's
Hmm.
plain, it's not bedazzled or anything. And then there are the long white gloves that go up basically up to her upper arms. It's floor length, and then her hair is up and poofy in the front. And then there's like a veil that's part of the headpiece behind her.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah.
do you want to add anything to the description of the
Because,
wedding gown?
like, it's good to say headpiece because there is, like, it's not just the veil,
Right.
right? There's, like, I don't know how to describe it necessarily, but it comes down, like, the center of her hair, doesn't it?
So, like, in the center of it is her hair.
Yeah.
So, like, it's like a poof of hair surrounded sort of by like a pointy, there's a point on her forehead of white, whatever the
Yes.
material
Yes.
is. And
Hmm.
then there's the hair, and then it like goes around the back. And then from the back is the veil.
Yes.
Instead of the veil over her face, it's
Hmm.
behind her.
Yes.
Um, yeah. So anyway, so we cut to Fran being on a coffee table, and Val is fixing the skirt for her. And anyway, Fran says to her mother that she wants the wedding to be really classy, so don't invite anyone from our side. And which is funny because obviously normal people want to invite their families if they're having a big wedding. But
Hmm.
anyway, so uh, Val comments about how meanwhile these invitations are to die for. And Fran's like, Ma, I called you 2 hours ago and said I was getting married. And Sylvia explains, Sweetheart, I have been preparing for this moment since before your embryo had a yolk sac. Now, let's go over the wedding list we made out together. So Fran gets off the coffee table and they sit down on the couch together. And Sylvia opens this big wedding book and she makes a big show of blowing the dust off it because
Hmm.
that's how long it's been since they've opened it. And
Hmm.
so she starts going down the list: dead, 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 any minute now, dead. And Fran's like, oh, Ma, gee, this affair might end up being cheaper than we thought. Maybe you could spring for the double stuffed potato. Um,
Hmm.
and so they continue going through the wedding plans. And Sylvia asks her, do you still want to dance your first dance to sexual healing? And Fran's like, no, I filled this out like 20 years ago. Let's go with play that funky music, white boy.
Hmm.
Um, we'll talk about that later, I think.
Mhm.
Um, and Sylvia says to her, "Meanwhile, my gown looks gorgeous on you. Can you believe that I was that size when I was your age?" And Fran's like, "Yeah, well, let's not tell Mr. Sheffield. There's no reason to give him a crystal ball."
Mhm.
And Sylvia, I think that's when Sylvia yells at Morty for eating the chocolates off the Raisinets, and she goes to talk to Morty, leaving Fran and Val alone.
Mhm.
And Val says to her, "Oh, Fran, you and Mr. Sheffield, this is like a fairy tale." And Fran's like, "I know, isn't it great?" And she's very excited and chipper as she says that. And Val says, "And it's so sudden. You don't even call each other by your first names." And boom, he pops the question. And Fran's like, "I know, isn't it great?" But her enthusiasm has dropped significantly.
Mhm. As she's realizing.
Uh-huh. And Val says, "And what's amazing is that he asked you in front of his mother. You said they didn't get along and that he would do anything to spite her." And Fran, everything has now fallen into place. And Fran realizes, "My God, Val, Mr. Sheffield proposed to me just to get even with his mother. Oh, wow. Good thing she showed up, huh?" And Fran's like, "Val, I can't marry someone under false pretenses." And Val's like, "You can't? Gee, you think you know a person. So what are you
Mhm.
going to do?" "Well, what any woman in my position would do. I'm going to screw with his head so bad he's going to look like Mr. Softy." And she is
Mhm.
determined and she's going to get her man. Or maybe not in the
Get
way,
yes.
she's going to
Get
get
back.
him. She's going
Get
to
yeah.
get back at her man. Yes. Thank you. Do you want to add anything?
Just that in between the crystal ball comment, Fran asks Sylvia to actually get her father's good hair out of the fruit. I don't know.
Hmm.
That's what prompts Sylvia to get up, and then
The
she
fur vault, what they call the fur vault.
uh, uh,
It's not a fur vault.
and that's when she yells at him about sucking the chocolate off the raisinets.
Right.
um, so, so then we are still at Sylvia's, but at this point, Maxwell is at the door. Val's gone. Sylvia's not in the room. Fran opens the door to Mr. Sheffield. "Hello, darling," kisses him right away, pulls him in. He's obviously trying to get up the courage to talk to her, but she won't let him.
Nope.
She's talking about, oh, at the honeymoon.
Well, so he doesn't know what to call her. He
Yes.
calls her Miss Fine. I mean, Fran. I mean, and then she says, "Go ahead if you have the
Yeah,
line."
like, don't worry about it. At the honeymoon, it's just going to be, and she starts growling.
"Oh, what difference does it make what you call me? After the honeymoon night, it's just going to be rawr."
Yep.
Okay,
And,
go ahead.
I really wanted to see you. Um, and I mean, Fran's like kind of taking him towards the couch. And
Yeah,
and just to remind everybody, the Fine family couch is covered in plastic.
yes,
And like, you'll be the boss, I'll be the nanny. You give me a raise and I'll give you one. So again, very flirtatious. As a child, we would not know what she's talking about.
correct.
And again, Maxwell's kind of protesting because she's kind of got him laying on, like, she's kind of on top of him on the couch, and like, we're in I don't know if he says parents or mothers, but
We're in your mother's house.
yes, and she's like, "Don't worry, the couch has protection." Again,
Yep.
would not
Yep.
have gotten that.
Mhm.
Um, and again, right around then is Sylvia's like coming into the room, and she's like, and so Fran immediately is like, "Oh, glad we're on the same page, like that my
Well, so
parents will
he
move in."
tries to what he's been trying to do this whole scene. He says, "Miss Fine, there's something I have to tell you." And she says, "Oh, I knew it. I knew it." He's like, "Are you very upset with me?" "No, I want my parents to move in with us too."
Yes. And this is when Sylvia is coming up, like, and so of course after she says this, "Oh, we're moving on up to the east side."
Yep.
And Maxwell's trying to intervene at this point to like stop this from getting any farther. Um, and so she's like, "Actually, Sylvia, that's too formal. Call me Ma." And then Sylvia says something in Yiddish.
She says, "We're family. Mishpucha." and manages to spit in his eye while doing that.
Yes. And then Fran, of course, is kind of up against Maxwell, saying, like, oh, yes, every morning, every night, the first thing and the last thing you'll hear is my voice.
Uh-huh.
um, and then the doorbell rings, and there is Elizabeth. And Sylvia, like, answers the door, lets her in, kisses her cheek. Oh, I just smeared some.
I just smeared you.
Yeah, I smeared you, as she's wiping her cheek. It turns out that Fran invited her over. They get her on the couch, but of course, Fran also warns her, don't get up too suddenly unless you need a waxing.
Uh-huh.
Meanwhile, Sylvia's like, oh, honey, you want to take your shoes off? I got plenty of slippers from the TWA. And of course, Elizabeth is immediately like, nope. She doesn't say no, but she says, no, I already have something. And she takes out like a small bottle of alcohol and just like takes a shot of it.
She says, I have something far more comforting from the Concord.
Yes. And she takes the shot of alcohol. And then, of course, she's now turned her attention to Maxwell and is saying, I know those 4 years, I raised you for those 4 years before boarding school, which is sad.
Mm-hmm.
I know you. And of course, though, Maxwell's still kind of like, oh, that was you? I thought it was Niles in a wig, look like Kim Novak or something.
Just like Kim Novak.
hmm And um and again, so basically she's trying to say, like, you just did this to get at me. And Fran intervenes, like, oh no, like, I've known him for 3 years and there's no way he would use me like that, play with my feelings, hurt me so deeply, so that only a Caribbean cruise could make up for it. And
Mhm.
Elizabeth's just like, well, he tests me. And Maxwell corrects her, no, I just don't know you well enough.
Right.
um and and I'm and he's
He adds, you
yeah,
know,
that he feels bad that because of that he hurt someone who he cares for very deeply about.
right.
um and so for a split second there's a nice mother son moment where they're like, oh, well, maybe we should take some time to get to know each other. But then of course Elizabeth's like, there's a honk, but not now. Jean-Luc is waiting for me. And that's
Hmm.
her chauffeur that she hired after the husband got a new
A new
secretary.
secretary. Yes.
So anyway, so she leaves, and then Maxwell's like, "You did all that to torture me." Yeah. Was it as good for you as it was for me?
Hmm.
And again, how do I make this up for you? And like you said in your, because at first he's like, what can I do to make this up to you? Like, oh, nothing. She kind of plays it off, and he asks again, and she's like, what do you take me for? And then, oh, okay, there's three things you can do. One, don't tell Cece for 48 hours. I promised Niles.
Yep.
Two, tell Ma. And three, return what I was gonna take
What I was going to wear.
to the honeymoon. And he looks in the bag. He's like, there's nothing but lip gloss. And Fran's like, gives us him a knowing look, and then she just says, supper.
Uh-huh.
And that's the episode. Do you have anything to add to that last scene?
Just a couple things at that very end, the last exchange between Maxwell and Fran. Um, you know, he one thing that he does say to her is that I'm so sorry to have done this to you, but believe me, if I was going to marry anyone in the world to make my mother miserable, it would be you.
Yep.
And she's like, "Oh, how sweet."
Yeah, like
Um,
in a very like, oh, how sweet. Like,
exactly. Like,
not
could you
take it
imagine
as a
being
compliment.
exactly? Um, and then I just think it's worth verbatim what she said because, like, you're right. He asks her if there's anything he can do to make it up to her, and she says no. He says, "No, please, I insist. Anything." And she says, come on, you're insulting me. He's like, are you sure? And she's like, well, maybe 3 things. Don't tell Miss Babcock for 48 hours. I promise Niles. Oh, and someone's going to have to tell Ma. I figured you'd want to do that personally. And his face falls. And then she says, and then the third thing is, well, you can return this. It's what I was going to wear on our honeymoon night. There's nothing here but lip gloss. Suffer, as you put it. And yeah, that's it. That's the only thing I wanted to add.
Yep.
So, is there anything like overarching you want to talk about before we jump into our shticks?
Well, again, I thought it was interesting how, like, I guess if you were in Fran's position, would you also think he's being serious, like, when he asks? Or would it take, like, or would you kind of know off the bat something's off?
Are you asking me as me or me as
Yes.
Fran?
You as you.
I would. That's an interesting question. I would like to think that I'm now old and wise enough to know that I would think something is off,
Yeah.
but I also recognize that I think I formed a lot of, shall we say, comedic views about how relationships should go from watching sitcoms like The Nanny,
Mm-hmm.
where like I would think it would not be like a terrible red flag for someone to ask me to marry him after 2 minutes, like we saw with Jules Kimball and Dope Diamond. Like
Mm-hmm.
now, I'd like to think that I'm paranoid enough to know like that's a poor choice. Like someone should probably get to know me a little bit before they're like, yes, I'd like to marry you.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm an acquired taste. Um, how about you?
Well, yeah, I mean, so I think we mentioned this whenever we had that episode where Emily guested. Like I've had before where I've just been like proposed to by a virtual stranger. And even then, I was like, no.
Yeah, you are a smart cookie. Don't marry someone you don't know.
Yes.
Poor
Now,
choice.
I mean, this is different just in that
They
they
do know
actually
each
know
other.
each other for 3 years. And obviously, we've spoken before about those moments they've shared, how they are, there's always been that kind of tension between them.
Mhm.
So it's a bit of a different situation. This is not a Disney situation
Right.
with the virtual stranger. Um,
But there still is that gap between like she's Miss Fine, he's Mr. Sheffield. Like
yes.
they're
And I
not
mean,
calling
think
each other
of
Fran and
Val.
Max.
Val's the type that again illuminates certain truths to
Which is kind of amazing.
yes, she's done this before. Like she is insightful at times or inadvertently
Right.
insightful. Uh,
Right.
where I mean she's the one who like makes Fran realize by pointing out, oh, like he despises her, will do anything to like get back at her. And that's what makes Fran realize what's going on.
Mhm.
So, again, like it could go either way if you were Fran, like if you were not you, but you were Fran in that situation, and
Absolutely.
he did
Yes, it's a
something,
proposal. It is
y-
absolutely a proposal.
yeah, like it's like you know each other, you like each, like so it's slightly different, but also a little suspicious that's in front of his mother who despises you.
Right. I mean, I would just like to mention that it's very clear, as we've seen through, the series thus far, that Sylvia is pressuring her daughter to get married.
Hmm.
And it makes me think of that line from, I think it was Glass Menagerie, man proposes, woman accepts.
Mm,
Um, that Fran has been conditioned that if someone asks her to marry her, she's going to say yes.
hmm.
Um, so, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else you kind of wanted to talk about before we got into the shticks?
No, I'm happy to jump to our favorite and not so favorite fashion.
Okay. So I wasn't a big fan of the plastic look.
No, me neither.
Like, it just very uncomfortable looking. I feel like she would squeak.
That's what I was thinking, that it's a noisy outfit.
Yes.
Like
And I feel like there's,
audibly knows
like, a
noises.
second where I heard something like that, but they probably, like, edited the sound as well on that, um, to keep it from being too
Right.
doesn't seem comfortable.
Uh-uh.
It's just fake looking.
Exactly. What did you think of the wedding dress?
So I was a bit surprised when they revealed that that was Sylvia's dress.
Yes.
Didn't necessarily seem to me like an old-fashioned dress.
Mm-mm.
I don't know if you had the same thought or not.
I mean, it looks dated from today's perspective, but not from the
The
perspective.
90s. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Um,
Would you
and
wear it if you were getting married?
no, it's not my style.
Agreed.
Um, so no. And I wasn't a big fan of the headpiece.
No, 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 not at all.
Yeah. So, but pretty amazing that in a span of 2 hours they were able to get that out of storage, I s- presume,
Oh,
unless
please. That's not the impressive part.
no,
The
no, and the
invitations.
invitations,
Yes.
like all of that. Um, so, so yeah. Did you have any favorite fashions?
Well, I did want to talk about what Fran was planning to wear to meet Maxwell, what she wore and what she was thinking of wearing to meet Maxwell's mother. I
Hmm.
didn't think either, like, if she was going to have to curtsy, yeah, that first one wouldn't have worked. I mean, it's the same outfit. It's a black turtleneck,
Yeah, the
black
skirt's the
leggings.
only thing different.
Exactly. Like, I guess I don't know why Maxwell was that concerned. Like, what did he think she was going to wear? The outfit she wore for that uh, society tea in season one? I don't think so. So, like,
Hmm.
what was he expecting? Is my question.
Yeah,
Um,
because that's part of the comedic thing about that. It's like she's like, "Oh, I'll go change," and then she comes back in virtually the same outfit, but that skirt is a designer label.
correct. To answer your question, I did have a favorite outfit.
Okay, which one?
It's the outfit she's wearing in her mother's home when Maxwell and his mother come. It's the white suit with like a black.
Oh,
Um,
okay, yeah. That looks a bit more like what he would have wanted her to wear to begin with.
oh, interesting. I guess that's fair.
Like
Um,
it's a little more modest. I don't
I wouldn't
not
call it
modest,
more.
but like
It's a little more. It's less flashy because it's black
yes.
and white. The
Hmm.
the skirt she wears to meet his mother is like gold and sequiny and black.
Hmm.
Um, I wouldn't call it more conservative because we can clearly see her, as Sylvia put it, décolletessen. Um,
Hmm.
and yes, I will refer to it as décolletessen per Sylvia
Hmm.
every time. Um, but I do like the white. I always consider her like white wedding suit because like in my
Hmm.
mind, probably from watching this episode innumerable times, like in my mind, that's how someone who's engaged dresses. They wear white as often as they can because they're about to wear a big white poofy dress. And so they're like,
Interesting.
I mean, no one does that, but in my mind, that's how it works.
Hmm.
So, did you have a favorite?
Nothing really stuck out to me, I don't think.
Okay,
Um, so unless you have something else, can we move to notable New Yorkers?
that's fine. Would
Okay.
you like to start?
Yes. So again, uh, that girl, the theme music played. Did you look? Did you see what that girl
I
was?
didn't know it was from that girl, so I didn't.
Yeah, that's when sometimes subtitles like help.
Oh,
Like that the theme from that girl plays.
fair. I just,
That Girl is an American sitcom that ran on ABC from September 8th, 1966 to March 19th, 1971. It starred Marlo Thomas as the title character Anne Marie as an aspiring actress. Um, so that's from our friends at Wikipedia. So apparently they played the theme song for that
mhm.
for this episode. And then there's a reference to Antonio Banderas.
So Antonio Banderas is a Spanish actor who's known for his work in several different genres, including Andrew Lloyd Webber's Evita, which,
Oh, really?
um, which I mentioned specifically because I will circle back to that in our future fun segment.
Okay.
And that's according to our friends at Wikipedia.
Mm-hmm. And then Fran makes that comment about how the picture of the royal wedding, like the royal family, looked like Mama's family.
Mama's Family was an American sitcom which was a spin-off from a skit called The Family, which appeared on The Carol Burnett Show and Carol Burnett and Company. That's according to our friends also at Wikipedia.
Mm-hmm. Um, I feel like this episode we don't get as many like
I agree.
in general than we like typically do. There is another reference to like the OJ Simpson trial when she
Yes.
talks about the OJ jury.
Uh-huh. So I'm going to quote verbatim from our friends at tampabay.com. It's a little bit long of a quote. So the reference is you're leaving a trail of blood even the OJ jury couldn't ignore. That's what Fran
Mhm.
says about Brighton and his nosebleed.
Yep.
And I'm quoting from our friends at tampabay.com, their archives. When four homicide detectives arrived at OJ Simpson's home early June 13th to tell him that his former wife had been killed the night before, they found blood on the door of the white Ford Bronco parked at the curb and a trail of blood leading to his front door, a police report says. By the end of the day, it says they had discovered more blood in the master bedroom and bathroom and in the foyer. Outside, they found a bloodstained glove resembling one found at the home of the victim, Nicole Brown Simpson, and 13 bloodstains inside the Bronco. End quote.
Wow.
So, yes,
Mm-hmm.
onward.
Yep. Ethel Merman.
She was known as the undisputed first lady of the musical comedy genre. She was an American singer and actress known for her distinctive voice and leading roles in musical theater, including the shows Anything Goes, Gypsy, Annie Get Your Gun, and Hello Dolly. She died in 1984.
Yep, I was
That's
gonna see if you could. So a good 10, 11 years
uh-huh.
for the episode.
Yeah, and that's according to our friends at Wikipedia.
Mm-hmm. Hello, Dolly.
A 1964 musical based on the farce The Merchant of Yonkers, which was later retitled and revised as The Matchmaker. It follows the story of Dolly Gallagher Levi, a strong willed matchmaker who seeks to make a match for a, and I quote, well known unmarried half a millionaire, end quote, in Yonkers, New York. And that's according also to our friends at Wikipedia.
Mm-hmm. Uh, she mentions, I guess, 20 years ago, she wanted to dance to Sexual Healing as her first dance.
Yeah, Sexual Healing, according to our friends at Wikipedia, was a 1982 song by Marvin Gaye, which was
Oh,
his
so like,
first.
yeah, so the timing doesn't even really work out.
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
You
And
missed,
she switches it to play that funky music, white boy.
yes. So that's a 1976 song written by Rob Parisi, and recorded by Wild Cherry. A 1990 version was also recorded by Vanilla Ice, and that's also according to our friends at Wikipedia.
Mm-hmm. Now, was Mr. Softy a thing?
Yes.
Okay.
And I'm going to quote, Mr. Softy has been bringing the very best ice cream and frozen treats to kids and families since 1956. Mr. Softy is the largest franchise of soft ice cream trucks in the United States. That's according to our friends at MrSofty.com.
Hmm.
You
And
didn't
then,
grow up with Mr. Softy trucks?
no, we just
Oh,
had like the ice cream man who would come with like various types of ice cream.
yeah. So Mr. Softy is an ice cream truck guy. I guess it's truck. They franchise apparently, and they have soft serve ice cream. So like you could get what was my personal favorite as a kid, a cone with vanilla ice cream and then strawberry like hard shell over it.
Oh, nice. Yeah, no, it was just like our ice cream man just had like the wrapped,
Oh,
you
like
know,
the
sugar.
pre-made.
Yeah. And then like popsicles as well. And so like you could get a push pop or like a SpongeBob one or like, the various different
Tweety
types.
Bird probably.
Yes, yes. Um, so yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think
And
Mr.
then
Softy had those and then also like the soft serve ice cream. So
gotcha.
bigger
Uh,
selection.
so there's
Continue.
then the reference to the Jeffersons when they say we're moving on up to the east side.
Yep. That moving on, that is the theme to the show The Jeffersons, which was written by Jeanette Dubois, and 40 years later is apparently still recognizable. And that's
Mhm,
according to our friends at metv.com.
mhm. Now, what is TWA?
Trans World Airlines. It was a
Wow.
major airline for, I believe, 71 years.
Mhm.
During that time, it was one of the big four domestic airlines. That's according to our friends at Wikipedia.
And then Kim Novak.
Kim Novak is a retired American actress and painter known for her role in Alfred Hitchcock's Vertigo. That's
Oh,
according to our friends at Wikipedia.
interesting.
You missed the Concorde.
Ah, sorry.
If,
Go
and I
for
quote, a Franco-British supersonic airliner that was retired after 27 years of commercial service in 2003. And that is also according to our friends at Wikipedia.
it. Was there anything else in the episode that you had?
April Fools. I
Mm-hmm.
think that's a reference to April Fool's Day, where people
Yep.
like to play pranks.
Yep.
SpaghettiOs,
Mm-hmm.
and I quote from their webpage, features delicious O-shaped pasta and a familiar cast of friends that add character to every bite. Some of them include letters from A to Z. There's the reference to Hamlet, which is a very famous
Mm-hmm.
uh, tragedy written by William Shakespeare.
Mm-hmm.
There's the reference to Sadie, Sadie, Married Lady, which
Mm-hmm.
is a song sung by Barbara Streisand in Funny Girl. So we got our Barbara Streisand reference for the day.
Mm-hmm.
And then the last one worth noting is Dina Merrill is the woman who played
Oh
Elizabeth
yeah.
Sheffield.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm out.
Okay. So Yiddishakop, there's a couple things. Let's
There
talk.
are a couple things. So first we have the word schmear a number of
Mm-hmm.
times. So I'm not going to cover that because we've covered that before. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
we've also previously covered the stuffed derma, but we haven't talked about it in I think a season and a half. So stuffed derma is no is a Jewish delicacy, I guess. Skin it as we saw in the episode Schlepped Away when the Sheffield family was trapped in the Fine family home. Uh, Brighton was told to try the stuffed derma. It's delish. And he says, "What's a derma?" And Gracie says, "Skin." And Fran corrects her, "Oh, sweetie, it's not skin, it's intestines."
Mm-hmm.
Um, so it's sort of like a sausage, but I don't think it's anyway. There's that. Um, then there's mishpucha, which is the Yiddish word that um, Sylvia uses to describe Maxwell's new relationship to her. It means family.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'll also mention the kind of as we were talking about the Sylvia's wedding dress, which was to be Fran's wedding dress. Um, the veil and the headpiece is sort of interesting to me because in a traditional Jewish wedding ceremony, there's a portion called a bedekin, which happens before the actual like service, and it's where the groom will come and lift the veil off the bride to make sure she's who he's supposed to be marrying. Actually,
Just
so
checking.
so he checks to make sure it's her, and then he puts it back over her, and that represents the fact that she will always be a separate person from him. She doesn't become like his or like they don't merge.
Oh.
She's a separate
Mhm.
person. It also recognizes her inner beauty.
Oh wow.
So there are a lot of like really sweet things about that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, did I miss any?
Um, I don't believe so.
Excellent. I love it when that happens.
Mm-hmm.
Would you like to take us to?
You were right. There were a couple of schmearing.
There were multiple schmears,
Yes.
and not one of them cream cheese, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Um, would you like to take us to our 90s nostalgia?
Yeah. So 90s nostalgia. So this like didn't have as many like in other shows, like episodes, I don't
Mhm.
think. I would say again, I don't know. Given that there's a distance between Maxwell and his mom, I don't know if social media or anything like that would play into like her knowing ahead of time who Fran, like whether they would have seen more ahead of time
Mhm.
because otherwise like Maxwell would have had to send a picture of Fran in like the mail for his mom to know, but like
Right.
today you would imagine that the kids would have posted pictures with Fran or like
Fran
stuff
would have
like that.
Facebook stalked Elizabeth
Yeah.
to know who she is.
Yes, exactly. So there might not have been that initial like unknown, like they didn't know who each other was. Yeah.
Right.
What about you?
That's a really good point. I'll just point out the wedding planning book that
Hmm.
Sylvia takes out. I feel like if someone was going to pre-plan a wedding, they would do it online now.
Oh yeah, like have a Pinterest page or something.
Yeah, exactly. Or at least a Word doc.
Mhm. Yeah, that's true. Yep. Um, Again, I don't feel like there was as much in this episode.
I want to say old cars.
Yes. Well, you have to. That's
I,
obligatory.
I did I didn't actually note it, but I feel like I'm not going too far out on a limb saying old cars.
Um, but yeah, I
Um, I'll mention the music selection that we already talked about.
oh yeah. Yeah. I mean the references as always.
Hmm.
But
Um, what about Niles trying to make the honeymoon reservation over the
oh
phone?
yes, that is true. Just like picking up the phone and trying to call instead of like getting online.
Exactly. That's what I was thinking.
Yep, that's a good one.
All right, then I'm out.
Okay. So we can actually address the kiss count.
I know.
So where are we at now, Debbie?
We're up to 8.
Yeah, we had three just in this episode.
Uh-huh. Which is always an exciting thing.
Hmm.
So I'm very happy to say that we've moved forward.
Hmm.
Did you have a favorite kiss of the 3? No is also a valid answer for the record.
Um, Maybe the first just because it's like the nice, like romantic, sweet, because he kind of like holds her and that kind of
Hmm.
how do you
Dips her.
yes, he dips her. Because the second time he has his eyes kind of like because she goes for him and he's not as like into that. And then the third one obviously is a bit more aggressive. Um, so I would say the first one. What about you?
I actually am going to go with the third one
Oh,
because
really?
it fits in so well with her screwing with his head. It's just
Mm.
I'm not as nice a person as you are. So
Okay.
yeah, that's the one I always think of when I think of this episode. So
Mm. Hmm.
yeah.
Okay. So yeah, we've made some progress on that front.
Hmm.
So how about some future fun?
Okay, so first off, we never ever see Elizabeth again. We never see her again. She doesn't come back.
She's off with Jean-Luc, we presume.
She's off with Jean-Luc. We do hear like she's on the phone with Maxwell a handful of times, but like we don't see her again. We
Mm.
do get to meet her ex-husband, James Sheffield, and the formerly naked secretary from his bed.
Mm.
And surprising no one, probably, she's very similar to Fran.
Oh, really?
There's actually a running gag throughout that episode where they wear similar outfits every time they're in the same room together.
Hmm.
Um, and they talk about their similarities and the similarities between James and Maxwell, and it's a good time. A good time is had by, I won't say all, but by most. Um, as a more minor point, Fran comments about how Niles was at the track. I just want to point out that we later learned that he has a bit of a gambling problem, and we'll
Oh.
see it when the family visits Atlantic City for Maxwell to try to get Chevy Chase to work with him.
Hmm.
Um, we because we've talked about the couch having protection. Um,
Hmm.
we do later see and why Sylvia and Morty keep it protected. They take the plastic wrap off the couch for a party honoring their synagogue's new cantor, who is then Fran's new boyfriend. His name is Gary. And unfortunately, the couch gets multiple rabbi-induced stains because they took the covering off.
Mm.
And the reason I said we'll talk about Antonio Banderas and Evita later is the cantor, Gary, actually ends up leaving the synagogue to take a part in Evita. So yeah. Let's see, what else do I have? So Fran says to Maxwell, there's no way you would do this to me, hurt me so deeply that only a Caribbean cruise could make up for. She does later go on a Caribbean cruise with Val after a psychic told her that she would dance on water with the man of her dreams.
Mm.
Maxwell panics, afraid that she's going to, actually meet someone, and takes the entire family, including Niles, Cece, the Fines, and Grandma Yetta on the same cruise. Fran does dance with uh, the man of her dreams on water, but she doesn't realize it at the time. So,
Mhm.
and then I think finally, the wedding dress that Fran is wearing doesn't really make a lot of sense because we later find out that what prompted Morty to ask Sylvia to marry him was Sylvia was pregnant with Nadine.
Mm. Mhm.
Um, so also, just as a side note, in the episode Wine Cellar, the first time Miranda joined us,
Mhm.
um, there we knew that the back of the Happy Birthday Ma, the like Happy 50th birthday banner said vote Dukakis. So the ages don't make any sense.
Mhm.
Um, so I just wanted to point that out. And
Yep.
yeah, so we have a lot of fun things ahead of us.
Mhm. Awesome. So then it's time for episode rating, and you get to go first this week.
I'm totally fine with it. I usually say I hate going first, but this time I'm giving it a 5. I would give it more than a 5 if I
Really?
could.
Shocking.
This is one of my favorite episodes. This is an episode that I will go back to and rewatch time and time again because it is just so comforting, and I love it to pieces. I don't like Elizabeth, but I love the progression between Maxwell and Fran. I love how she gets back at him for, making her a pawn in his war with his mother. Um, it's just I love this episode, so it's a 5. How about you?
I will also give it a 5.
Woohoo!
I wasn't as thrilled with the like get back just because again, like makes me uncomfortable if there's like an advance that's not necessarily wanted.
Oh,
Uh,
that's fair.
but overall, um, it was nice again to see some progression. I feel like Niles really embodied the audience in
Hmm.
the office when he's just like, just do it. Let me call up and make the reservations for the honeymoon. Oh,
Right.
you stupid fool. So yeah.
I'm so glad you gave it a 5 also. For our wonderful audience, there's clearly no pressure from me I'm not applying any pressure to change Bernadette's ratings. But I'm very glad that you also agree that it's 5.
Hmm. Yeah. Is there anything else you'd like to discuss regarding this episode before we wrap up?
I think I'm good. How about you?
Nope, I think I'm good as well.
All right. That's all we have for you today. We hope you had a fine time with us as we revisited The Nanny. Join us next week when we'll be discussing episode 58, Having His Baby.
If you'd like to reach us on social media, you can find us on Twitter at Nanny Revisited. You can also send us email at afinetimenannyrevisited@gmail.com. Have a great week.